Well, I'm back on the Katinga project. My soldering iron went out, and so I'm waiting for a new one to come in on order, so I can't really do any lighting on my original series Enterprise 1350, which I'm currently building. And so I decided to go back and work some on the Katinga. A lot of the Katinga components are needing soldering as well, so obviously I'm not going to be getting to those items, but I decided it was time to get into masking issues on these resin clear parts for the bridge section on the Katinga. And I believe it was Mr. Ataz on SciFi Model Action that had mentioned about some sanding in relation to these, and got me thinking, because I had tried some sanding and I couldn't get tape or anything to stick to these parts. And then I was thinking, well, maybe what I need to do is be more aggressive. Obviously I don't want to just randomly use sandpaper and sand off a lot of the great detail that exists on these, because these are highly detailed like the studio model. So I went back in, like on the grooves here where the lighting goes, and this piece of tape is just here as a temporary marker for me, but where these windows go here and will be here, because this sits well, it's upside down at the moment, but this sits on top. And I was thinking, well, regular sandpaper doesn't seem to work, so I decided to get my diamond files out and be a lot rougher with the surface in terms of these grooves. So using 2 or 3 different diamond files, I filed these trenches down where the lights end up going, and it actually truly roughed it up nicely. And then I went back in with sandpaper, which I believe I was using 400 grit, and I went back in and sanded down these troughs, of which this didn't work using sandpaper alone before, but I smoothed out the roughness, some of the roughness that the diamond file put in, and actually the Tamiya tape is actually sticking now. So I took some measurements and to cut out some masks for these windows. Now, like on the photo I'm showing on the screen right now, this is of the studio model in the Conus 1 version, but I think the lighting on this trench was the same excuse me, in terms of the windows. So obviously I don't think I'm going to be able to do window masking quite that complex, but I'm doing a resemblance of it, and I'm using Tamiya tape that I've measured out to be roughly 1 millimeter in thickness. This here is a little thin, and I've been cutting off little sections of this and applying them as masks using the top ridge on this clear part right here, and trying to get those in and get those straight. And they are sticking, where before this, nothing I could get to stick to this before. So I'm going to go ahead and continue this. I need to make a few alterations to some of the existing masks in terms of their alignment, and add a few more here, and then I'm going to be flipping this part over and putting masks for the windows on the upper trench, which is the part's upside down at the moment, and get those in place. And then I'll be able to go ahead and see about priming this part and getting it ready for painting. So hopefully that'll work out, and then I can come back after it's painted and scrape these little masks off, and hopefully I'll get square windows, which is what I'm looking for. So we'll have to see how that turns out. Okay, I've got the masks applied to the trench where the windows are on the bridge section. This was even more difficult than the forward section. There again, I had to use a diamond file to go in and scuff that up before sanding it a little bit to get the masks to stick. Hopefully they'll stick when I start applying the primer. They're still not sticking wonderfully, but I hope they'll work fine. So I've got those done for that part. And I now have all of them done for this section. So that's like that. So what happens is that part, this part here, fits on top of this other part. Let me put that together. Fits just like that. So these windows down here will be lit with a white or off-white color, actually an off-white color or warm white. But these up here on the bridge dome will be lit with a red LED, and I've already bore out the solid dome section here. I don't know if you can see that on camera right there, for an LED to go inside that resin to light that up. And let me mock that up so you can see what that'll look like. So I don't know if you can really see very well what that looks like. The LED is obviously kind of bright right now. The masks are on there, and they're, to me, a masking tape, so it's that yellow tape that's not too dark, but hopefully you can kind of see where the red will show through. Now I'm going to prime this with a black primer, a Krylon black primer, for light blocking purposes. So the next thing to do is go ahead and prime them up, and we can take a look at what some of the lighting will look like. Well, the parts have been light blocked with at least a first coating of the primer. This part is very difficult using a rattle can to get down into these areas, so I'm going to have to go back and put another coat on there, as you can see. But what I was concentrating on the most was getting the bridge dome light blocked, and it turned out really well. But I am going to have to go back and do some of this and through here. I may have to decant some of this primer and put it in to use in my airbrush to get into these areas, because I don't want to get with a rattle can primer too thick on other parts of this. But that turned out pretty good. That primer has stuck really well. I'm very pleased with that, so I'll add another coat to that. This is much easier to do. This turned out really well. All the masks stuck, and I don't know if we can see in there, but you can see them, a good portion of them right there. So that is stuck really well. I just need to go in and scrape a little primer off I got on the inside. Basically all I really need to do is just clean up right along the edge here. I got most of the primer off with a cotton swab and some paint thinner, but that won't be that big of an issue. I should have taped that off to begin with, and I tried, but getting tape to even stick to the inside was, well, difficult, so I'll just clean that up. But everywhere else it's turned out really well. Don't know if you can see much on the video because it's black. I just need to do a little bit more to it on the bottom. I think you can maybe see that. There we go, right there, and that'll be fine. So I'm happy with the way that turned out with the mask sticking. What I'm doing right here is figuring out what my base coat color is going to be, and I'm going to use pure acrylic paints on this, and I haven't done that before, at least with Vallejo paints before, but I wanted to give them a try. I've seen them used by other artists on YouTube and stuff before, and they've looked really nice. What's nice is with them is they're very easy to mix, and I've been working on, with the combination of the different colors that I have, what base color coat that I wanted to put on the vessel. And I don't know if you can see it really well, but that's probably what it's going to be right there, which is a 50-50 mixture of silver and reflective green. I may just add a slight tinge of gold to it. I'm not for sure, but I think that's the color that I'm going to use on the Katinga as the base, and then mix up some variants of that for the other highlighting on the wings and different things that need to be done. Well, there is the clear bridge top section for the Katinga. And no, this video sequence isn't shot out of order. This was primed. And as you can see, it's been pretty much stripped back to bare of all the primer. And so this is going to be a little story about what not to do. I was working on the light blocking on this piece, and as you may recall from earlier, there was tape in here around the bridge dome section in this trough for the windows. And I started by spraying this with a rattle can, and that was just a huge mistake in terms of the primer. I should have decanted the primer, which for those of you who might not know what that means, it basically means taking the primer out of the can and bottling it up to be used in an airbrush, which is an example of what I have here, black Krylon primer that's been decanted. I basically use a water bottle and empty some primer from the spray can into that and pour it into these glass vials, because this is actually a lot of black primer. So, but anyway, in that process, I noticed that there was just too much buildup in trying to get the black primer shooting from the can down into these trough areas for the windows, and on some of these detail areas deep down in here and down into these sections back into here where all these sections, these joints come together. It was a nightmare, and I could not get it completely light blocked. So the thing to do was to decant some of the primer and put the primer on with an airbrush, and that's basically what I have to do to get this in a whole bunch of light coats to get it sealed up properly. There's just way too much detail, and I don't know if the camera's focusing on this really good, but there's tons of little itty bitty detail on here, and shooting it with the rattle can, a spray can, just builds up the primer too much. Even if you're trying to do it in light coats, you won't get this light blocked if you're lighting this the way I am, by putting an LED up through a hole that I've bored here to get red to come out through the clear parts for the windows. You just can't do it with a spray can, and if you can, well, God bless you, because I certainly can't do it. So I'm going to be reshooting this with black primer after I create some new window masks to go here for the bridge section, and we'll reshoot it and get going over again. Now, that being said, I've also have the light blocking that's all been done on this part, and the masks have held up very well. I think they're going to be fine. So this obviously sits on top here, and this section down here will be lit with white LEDs in this part, and then of course the red up in here. So let me get back to priming this, and hopefully we can make some progress to get this forward whole section done so we can get it up on the model. Well, there it is, light blocked up again, and this time with some reinforcement, so I didn't have to worry about too much paint on areas that were not very important, except up here on the bridge dome, which is still just slightly drying. But bring it up here and put that red LED down in there, and nothing is coming out. So that's the way I wanted it, because I have those paint masks on there, so that should work out really fine. So the next thing to do is to go ahead and install the lighting for this part, which I've started, to which I'm going to use a light strip, LED tape. So I'm going to bring that back around and put it in here. So I need to go ahead and get this ready to get closed, and I need to go ahead and put some foil tape in here and get ready to put in the probably 2 white LEDs, warm white LEDs that match the warm white of this, to go in this section so that the windows here will be lit. So that's the next step, and I'm going to go ahead and move on to doing that. Alright, here's the lighting setup for this part of the ship. What I've done is I went ahead and mounted the 3mm red LED, which is for the in here in the hole that I drilled up into the bridge dome. I glued that in with some low temp hot glue, and then I went back and used some tool dip to black that whole area out, so I did not get any light bleed washing out the red LED from the LED tape, the warm white LED tape that I installed in this section that will be lighting the front of the windows here. So that's the simple setup, and this will close up and go down on here. And there it is in place, and that's showing you the area that I'm going to have to deal with in terms of some light blocking on the outside. I didn't put a lot of primer on the front because I wanted to get it lit up so I could see exactly what I needed to do in terms of primer. So you can see where I need to put some more. But the spillage of the white light up into the bridge dome and everything up here is not happening, so I'm happy with that. So this is pretty much to the point where it needs to be glued in. Now these are resin parts, so I'll be CAing them, using CA to glue them together. And I went ahead and marked my cables with some black stripe because I'm using network wire here from Ethernet cable. And so I know which ones are going to which light. And seal this up with some CA, and then I can deal with the light leaks here on the outside, and then this part will be finished and ready to get its final coat of paint. I think I'm going to do this in sub-assemblies, so I think I'm going to paint this section as one piece, and the maybe I may put them all together. The onion section, the onion dome bulb section, I may do as another, but we'll see. I went ahead and glued in with CA the torpedo tube that has its own small 3mm red LED in it, and tested it with this resistor right here. I'm going to be cutting these back and resoldering this on much shorter. So the other LED strip, which is this one here, will wrap around on the inside here and come around this side. So I will have wiring for this strip, wiring for the strip that's in here, wiring for the red LED there, and the red LED here. All of these are resistored at 12 volts. The whole Tinge build is resistored at 12 volts. So I'm toying with the idea of putting this on a separate circuit so I can control the torpedo tube separately, and well, I'm probably going to do that. But it's getting very close, so let's move on to the next item and get these things sealed up. Well, there's the bulb mounted onto the front. I have the, if it'll focus in right in there, I've got the LED tape is in there, and the photon torpedo, which you can't really see, but it's in place. This bulb I've had a lot of problems with, being a resin part. Two halves, just like the kit part. It wants to continually go back to its memory. You heat it up in warm water and you reshape it like it's supposed to, and then when it cools down, it obviously starts warping again. I think this part would have been much better if it had been cast as one piece instead of the split down the middle, or at least perhaps cast this direction so the seam is running right through here. But personally, I think if it was cast as one piece with an open top, this would have been a much better option. Putting these halves together is very difficult, and keeping them straight, they want to continually warp. It is a nice looking piece with the hull marks on it, but it's going to take some effort and work to get this joint to blend out here and on the underside. Let me get the kit part and we'll take a look at the differences between them real quick. You can clearly see the shape differences between the two pieces. They are, well, the kit piece just isn't shaped like the studio model. It's more rounded, and the resin part is more oblong and a little more squashed like it's supposed to look. In terms of the side profiles, they are very similar, but this one, the kit piece, is a little more deep. What this piece is nice, but I don't think it's necessary really to build this kit as a replacement piece. The replacement items that are much more important are the bridge dome section and everything that goes on top, which is this piece right here. This is, I think, critical to replace. If you don't do anything on this kit in terms of changing out anything, getting this resin part, I think, is definitely a go for major hull sections besides some of the detail parts. Now, I just closed up the upper part of the bridge, the two parts with the bridge dome and the triangular part. I use CA on these two pieces. They are resin. And also, if I do need to get back in there for some reason, I can get in there with the CA. But I just got those glued together, and I'm going to let those set aside now and set up, and the wiring is all run out, so I should be able to attach those to this part to the lower half. I may have to wait to the next build video, but it'll be ready to go. Well, I thought before I ended this video I should show it to you lit up. The torpedo tubes in place. I have some acrylic tulip around the seam here. That's the glare that you see on the torpedo tube, just to light block that a little bit more. There was a slight crack there. Put in my first coat of some red putty on it to start getting it sealed up. It's going to require some sanding. A lot of sanding here underneath. That'll have to be worked on. But overall, it should light up really well. Now, these fibers here obviously haven't been trimmed and they have paint all over them, so that's going to take some work. I mean, should be lighting up quite nicely when they get cut back. But there you go. There's a little bit of a hint of what's coming. Hopefully it's going to turn out pretty decently. So that's this update on the Katinga. I want to thank everyone for watching, and happy modeling.